Y'all were enjoying each other's company, so didn't mind giving you a few extra minutes there. You know, I was out last week, out preaching, and so I had asked Brother Keith, Elder Keith, to fill in for me, and I got a text, I guess, about Thursday. It said he was testing positive for COVID. So COVID's still out there a little bit. You still hear about it occasionally. So I guess he's still out today, maybe. I don't know. So he couldn't pinch hit for me, but Ed pinch hit it for my pinch hitter. So appreciate Ed doing that, and Ed's not here today yet, so I can't thank any of them for helping out. We've got till the end of this month, which is this Sunday and 2 more Sundays, I think. Is that right? Let me see. I can tell you in just a minute. 3 more Sundays. Yeah. Okay. Good. Got this Sunday and 3 more Sundays till the end of the month. By silence your phone, please. Thank you very much. The new semester actually started the 1st of this month, but they were kind enough to give us an extra month to finish up our study, and I appreciate that very, very much. All right, we are going to talk on this chapter called The Church, A Little Bit of Heaven on Earth. We're studying heaven in here, looking at a wonderful, wonderful book, by the way, that we're studying, and I really like this chapter and think this chapter is an important chapter. When I first moved to Tunica, I raised some money to buy some signs, a new sign out front, and 2 large signs out on the highway, and wanted people to know we were there and where we were. And I found a little logo online that I borrowed with a cross on it, and we put on that. I had on my business cards, everything, and on our signs, the Tunica Church of Christ, a little bit of heaven on earth. And I had several people in the community that would see that and mention that to me. We're studying about heaven, and I think that is an appropriate motto here, that we have a little bit of heaven on earth here, and it is indeed the Lord's church. And we want to understand that and realize the place that the church has relative to heaven. The eternal city, the great blessings that we will enjoy in heaven, as we have been talking about for several weeks, that experience begins right here on earth, in the church. Now, we talked about the Garden of Eden being the original heaven, and that is true. And the church was not exactly set up on that particular manner. But when we look at it and study it, we understand that it is a little bit of heaven, and was designed to be so. Some people like to think that you can be saved outside of the church. Well, I got a relationship with the man upstairs. I don't really need to, be in church every Sunday. I can do my own thing, me and the big guy upstairs, we got it all worked out and stuff. No, I'm sorry, you don't. Because the way to get to heaven comes through the church. And it doesn't come through any other manner. And so whatever the connection is between the church and heaven, that's the main connection, the fact that you can't get to heaven except through the church. We're going to look at that and talk about that a little bit. Out there in the religious world, I'll try to be kind this morning, out in the religious world, they don't think like that about the church. They think about the church as an afterthought that God had, kind of a plan B when plan A didn't work. And that teaching really is the teaching that most of the churches across the city landscape teach to one extent or another, and it is called premillennialism. That that Jesus came to earth to establish his kingdom, and he came with that intent, but them nasty little old Pharisees and Jews prevented him from doing that because they took him and killed him. And so he wasn't able, he was rejected, and he wasn't able to set up his kingdom here on earth. And so as an afterthought, God decided, well, I'll set up this little temporary thing called the church. And but later, at some point, Jesus is coming back again, and this time he's going to succeed. He's coming back to earth, and he's going to set up his kingdom again on David's throne in Jerusalem. In Jerusalem. That's why the Jews hold on to Jerusalem, because they believe that's where Jesus is coming back to find David's throne, wherever it is. It may be like 10 levels of dirt down, but he's going to find David's throne. He's going to sit on that throne, and finally he's going to establish his kingdom here on earth, and he's going to rule for 1,000 years. People have a chance to a second chance of believing in him, and then after that 1,000 years, then we'll all then go back to heaven. That's a teaching called premillennialism in a nutshell, which demeans the church itself as a kind of an afterthought of that really wasn't that that great a plan that God had, but rather it was an afterthought. So yeah, our concept of the church in churches of Christ, that is the Church of Christ, we believe that the church was the great plan and mystery that God had way back in the days of the prophecies, and they prophesied about the church coming, and it was all a part of God's plan way back in the Old Testament era, and Christ was able to get that plan to work and happen. So just as So let's go here. Let's go to Matthew chapter 16. Let's go ahead and get this text done. Matthew chapter 16, make sure we understand what Jesus is saying here about the church. This is the famous confession of the apostles, in particular Peter. They'd gone kind of way up north, as far north as Jesus ever traveled while he was on earth, up to Caesarea Philippi. And he gathered his disciples around, kind of away from the normal folks he was around, and he just had a little powwow with his apostles and asked them this question: who do people say that the Son of Man is? Of course, Son of Man is the nickname that Jesus gave himself. It's what he called himself. It goes back to the Old Testament phraseology. So who do people say that I am? And they said, some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, but still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. It's interesting that some people thought that these prophets had actually risen from the dead, but he said, well, who do you say that I am? Jesus was not a southerner, or he would have said, who do y'all say that I am? But he wasn't a southerner. Who do you say that I am? And Peter then, me, Lord, I got the answer. He always had the answer. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Tremendous statement. And Jesus said to him, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, that's Simon, son of Jonah, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. So this Peter was sort of inspired at the moment by God himself to give that answer, because that answer, that statement is important. You're the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus continues, and I also say to you that you are a little rock. Petros. Yeah. It is it's actually a Greek word that refers to a small stone, a little rock. And, that's the nickname that Jesus gave to Peter. Peter's name was Simon, but Jesus called him Simon the little rock, Petros, Simon. So he said unto him that you are a little rock, and upon this big boulder I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overpower it. Upon this big boulder of what you just said, that I am the Christ, the Son of the living God, upon that rock. Remember, Peter himself would say that to the Pharisees, that you have rejected the stone which the builder has laid, referring to Jesus as the great rock, the great foundation. And so he says, upon this rock, if my understanding is correct here, as we look at the text and what it is saying, this rock, no, he didn't say upon you the rock. He said upon this rock, which refers not to a person but to a statement. Upon this rock I will build my church. Then he says, and the gates of Hades will not, my text says, overpower it, prevent it, stop it from happening. The gates of Hades shall not prevent it. Now we have a couple of visitors back here. We're glad to have you all with us today. And all of my class knows now about Hades and the Hadean world. They all know what that is referring to. Right? Right, okay. Hades is the realm of the dead. That's where you go when you die. You go to Hades if you die of natural causes, or if you are executed and put to death, you go to Hades. So Jesus says here that the gates of Hades will not overpower it or prevent it, which is a prophetic statement by Jesus. And in fact, he is saying, I'm going to build my church, and even if you kill me, it won't prevent me from establishing my church. As a matter of fact, it actually could not be established before Jesus died. The church is blood-bought. It's a blood-bought institution. And so Jesus was actually saying that it requires my death to be established. But it's not. My death will not prevent it from being established. So the Pharisees, thinking that by putting to Jesus to death, they would do away with this movement, but by putting Jesus to death, they actually helped to establish this movement by the events of Acts chapter 2 and the establishment now upon the earth, this thing that we call or know of as the church. So then let's continue this text a little bit. He says, I will give to you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Keys, we know what they're used for, to open doors. Peter, I'm going to allow you to open the door to the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall have been bound in heaven, and whatsoever you loosed on earth shall have been loosed in heaven. Now, the old King James kind of didn't quite exactly get the grammar right in this, and the teaching of the that comes out of Rome is that here they have convinced people over the centuries that Jesus was here saying, Peter, you'll have the keys, and whatever rules you want to make down here on earth, they'll be made up in heaven too. And so any changes you want to make, anything you want to do, be fine. And whatever rules that Jesus came up with, if you want to loosen those rules, and they'll be loosed up in heaven. That's the general teaching that we get that comes out of Rome. But it couldn't be further from the truth, and our text here that we read just kind of proved that to be the case. Notice the wording here. The wording is correct now, and again, I use the New American Standard. They're honest enough to give us the correct reading. Notice again what the text says. And whatsoever you bind on earth shall have been bound in heaven. So it was first bound in heaven, and then it was bound upon earth. And whatsoever you loose on earth shall have been already done, loosed in heaven. So it's heaven calling the shots, and then on earth, the apostles were binding those laws upon men. So when Peter said on Pentecost, repent and be baptized, that was the teaching of heaven, and Peter was simply binding now that teaching upon the earth. So let's make sure we are clear and understand what's being said in spite of what comes out of Rome and what all the media have bought into, et cetera, et cetera. Any questions about that? So the church and the kingdom here is certainly a huge part of God's ruling and sharing with us the things that heaven wants us to understand. Now, we know that there is the kingdom of heaven and the kingdom on earth. Jesus was crucified as what? What did the sign above him say that he was? King, yeah. Pilate put that on there himself. Jews didn't like that either, but Pilate said, what I've written, go home, get away. So if you have a king, what does a king have to have? A kingdom, then, yeah. A king without a kingdom is someone who's been having a senior moment here. What is it whenever a ruler is ousted and he has to live in another country? Exiled, yeah. Yeah. That king that's exiled is no king at all. He's exiled. But Jesus is the king of his kingdom. The kingdom on heaven And there Jesus, who has all power and authority, inspired the apostles to lay down the rules of his kingdom and the borders of his kingdom, go into all the world, preach the gospel. And the teachings then that are to go into that kingdom are to be there and established. All right. Any question? Anybody have anything there that you want to deal with? Now, let's get into this thing about the church being a little bit of heaven on earth. Let's turn over to Acts chapter 2. Turn over to Acts chapter 2, one of my favorite passages in the scriptures that tells us so much about New Testament Christianity. That is what we're trying to be like, right? We are a product of the Restoration movement that is trying to restore first century Christianity in the 21st century. That's what. That's our roots. That's our efforts in the religious world to get back down to the basis of the teaching of the New Testament church. Acts chapter 2, as you know, a great passage, and as a result of that, almost 3,000 people were baptized into Christ. About 3,000 souls gladly received the word, and they were baptized. Kind of interesting, the number. I don't think when Moses came down from the mountain and was displeased, he threw the tablets down, and the earth opened up, and about 3,000 people died that day. So on the day the law of Moses was given, about 3,000 people died. On the day that the law of Christ was given, about 3,000 people were born again into the world. Okay, so let's just think of this passage a little bit about the church being heaven on earth. Verse 42 then, Acts 2, and they were continually devoting themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, that would be the Lord's Supper in this context, and to prayer. So these people are following the teachings of the apostles, which are echoing the words and teachings of Christ. How much better would our world be if we just followed the apostles' doctrine, the teachings that Christ gave to them? They continue to have fellowship with one another. We know how important fellowship is. The breaking of bread, that I think in context is a reference to the Lord's Supper and to prayer. And everyone kept feeling a sense of awe, and many wonders and signs were taking place through the apostles. A sense of awe at what was happening, almost like when John looked through that door and saw God sitting on his throne, a sense of awe. People saw what was happening, and these signs and wonders taking place through the apostles. And all who had believed were together. Now, I know that the people who were baptized were believers, because it says all who had believed. So they were believers that had been baptized, or they became believers at the point of baptism. They were together and had all things in common, and they began selling their properties and possessions and were sharing them with all as anyone might have need. Day by day, continuing with one accord in the temple and breaking bread from house to house. They were taking their meals together with gladness and sincerity of heart. That sounds like a pretty good pretty good group of people that were really enjoying themselves. Really enjoying themselves. They had this togetherness. They were together. They had all things in common. They sold property and were sharing that with other people, being gracious and sharing things. So it is, as members of the church, we are experiencing here a little bit of what heaven's going to be like, being together with God's people, sharing things that we have with others. What a wonderful blessing it is to enjoy the fellowship of Christ's church here on earth and to be blessed by it in such a wonderful way. My goodness, how wonderful heaven must be if these are the kind of people that share things in common with others. And we all can think of ways that the Lord's church has comforted and helped and assisted us. Oh my, as a young single preacher, my goodness, I was fortunate when I went out to Texas to a school. I was hired by a little church outside of Dallas and preached there for about 2.5 years. A single boy, they had a little wood frame house next to the church building, and but they took care of me. You know, I'm 1,000 miles away from my mom and dad, and so I didn't have mommy there to take care of me, but the Lord's church took care of me. I mean, one of the older ladies, she did all my laundry for me, starched my shirts and stuff like that. Families would bring me over food. They'd call me up, Dennis, we got this. Would you like a plate full? Yes, yeah, please. So they'd come walking in, bringing me food. They just took care of me. I left there once to drive back to Freed-Hardeman to go to the lectureship, and my old car broke down. I mean, broke down. I had to have some major auto repair, and it seemed like back then it was like $600, which was a lot 50 years ago. I didn't have $600. No way. I was making $25 a week. I didn't have $600. So what did I do? I called my brethren back where I was preaching and said, could you loan me $600 so I can get back home? Well, the next day I had the money, paid the guy off. When I got back, they wouldn't let me pay them back. No, Dennis, we're good for it. You're good. It's like heaven on earth, having people that care for you and watch out for you. All of you have experienced things like that. Where else are you going to get that? Where else are you going to get that kind of acceptance and love? You can make a serious mistake and come back and say, I'm sorry, and people will embrace you and put their arms around you and say, well, it's fine, it's good. The fellowship, the benevolence that we have, we weep with those that weep, we rejoice with those that rejoice, the opportunity to worship together like we do on the Lord's Day. Oh my goodness, how could it get any better? And even if these atheists are right, they're still wrong. Even if they're right and there is no heaven or hell or any of that stuff, we still had the best life here on earth that you could have. Well, where else would you want to be? This is the place that you'd want to enjoy life. Where you want to raise your children. You want to raise your children around God's people. So that is such an important part of the body of Christ, and it's such an important part of the church. So we are experiencing a little bit of heaven here on earth, no doubt. All right. Now, people will say, yeah, Dennis, but I don't go down there because there's a mean guy down there, a member of the church, and he overcharged me for his service, and I didn't like that, and that wasn't very Christian-like, and so I'm not going to church. All these hypocrites down there, yada, yada, yada. We hear that a lot. Well, how do we handle that? Because the church is a perfect institution filled with imperfect people. Well, let's look at a parable that Jesus told about the kingdom, okay, that we are a part of, the kingdom of heaven. We're part of the kingdom of heaven. We're on the segment that's here on earth, and there's a segment up in heaven. We're still in the kingdom part down here on earth. So Matthew chapter 13, it's got, I don't know how many parables in it, a bunch. It's the parable chapter. So let's share, it's kind of an interesting one here, beginning at verse 24. Then Jesus presented another parable to them. The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while his men were sleeping, the enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went away. And when the wheat sprouted and bore grain, then the tares became evident also. You know, Satan hates success of Christ's kingdom here on earth. If the kingdom is doing well, Satan's not happy. And Satan is going to sow as many tares amongst God's people that he can find. Everyone that's got a chip on their shoulder, or everyone that is antagonistic toward other people, or Satan always putting folks, sowing his tares among our kingdom. And those tares eventually become evident, don't they? They become evident, people that cause division and harm among us. We know that. Well, verse 27, the slaves of the homeowner came and said to him, "Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? So how then does it have tares, weeds?" And he said to them, "An enemy has done this." Yep. And our enemy is Satan, of course, and his demons. And the slave said to him, "Do you want us then to go and to gather them up? What, do you want us to go and get rid of them? We can go and gather up these tares if you want me to do that." But he said, "No. For while you are gathering up the tares, you may uproot the wheat with them." Okay? May do more harm than good. You go trying to throw people out, you may do more harm than good. Just you may uproot the wheat with them. Allow both to grow together until the harvest. Just love them, care for them, be nice to them. They may be hard to get along with, but just leave them alone. And in the time of the harvest, I will say to the reapers, first gather up the tares and bind them in bundles to burn them up, but gather the wheat into my barn. So, when the Lord comes back, he will gather out the tares. It's not our job. So, when we find people in in the Lord's body that are just hard to get along with, divisive, Just love them. Just be patient with them. Don't worry. The Lord will take care of that. In the end, He'll gather them out. The ones that need to be out of the kingdom, He'll do it. He'll do it justly and rightly. He'll take care of it. So, there may be a few hypocrites. Maybe a few thieves. Maybe some that are living immoral lives. Satan's going to do everything he can to get his disruptive nature into the church. And that's just the way it is. So, but our job is to be forgiving and loving and caring, helping. The Lord will take care of it. That's why we're judged individually. So every one of us shall give an account of himself to God. Yes?
You're saying this. I've been into all those sandpits. He used to be in Raleigh. He went to Marcus Wood. I don't know if he's still there, but I remember a lesson he was preaching similar to this, talking about someone basically almost like making an excuse for hypocrites. He said, hypocrites stand between you and God, who's closer to God.
There you go. Takes care of that, doesn't it? Yeah. So just a little thing for us to understand that in heaven the kingdom will be perfect, but here on earth it's filled with imperfect people, and we all are imperfect. But we don't have to worry about that. We are to just to love one another, care for one another. We are to throw coals of fire upon their heads. Just be so sweet and nice to them that it just makes them feel so bad about the way they're acting. So it's just a little lesson there about, the church is a perfect institution, but with an imperfect body. So it's just the way that is. It can't be. Nothing could be perfect. In my book, I mentioned this song by John Lennon called "Imagine," and I actually had in the original manuscript some of the words to that song, but the publisher said, "No, you got to get rid of that because there's publishing rights and all this kind of stuff." So I just make a brief reference to it in the book. But what it was about the song is that, just imagine a brotherhood of man where everybody loves one another and there's just peace and joy throughout the world. There's no heaven or hell. There's no religion, he says, but we just love and we care for one another. And just imagine what a wonderful world it would be. Yeah, that's heaven. And the church is a little bit of heaven on earth. We do love one another. We do care for one another. We are a brotherhood. We are a brotherhood. Peter said, love the brotherhood. We are to love our brotherhood, our fellow man and congregations around the world. We have a huge brotherhood around this world. So we're to love this brotherhood and not, so many people want to be critical. Don't want to go to church because of some issue that they have or that they don't like, and it just happens, and we're not to be the one that's involved or doing that kind of thing. All right, let's turn over to Colossians. One of my, if not my favorite texts when it comes to Jesus. I don't think there's a greater text than this text in Colossians. Colossians chapter 1, beginning verse 13. For he rescued us from the domain of darkness and transferred us into the kingdom of his beloved Son. Do you realize that your membership in this world had been transferred from the kingdom of darkness and sin, that you've been transferred into this wonderful kingdom of his Son, of Jesus. So we have this a king and a kingdom, and when we become Christians, we're transferred. We're taken from this world and put into the kingdom of his beloved Son, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. Now verse 15. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created, both in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible. Okay, the creative deity of Jesus. Then verse 18, and he is also the head of the body, the church. So here we have this great reference here that puts a lot of things together. First of all, you have the church, ekklesia, ekklesia, to call out, out of, lesia, to call out. So we are called out of this world to be transferred into the kingdom. And so he is the head of the body, the church, which is the body of Christ. And he is the head of that body. Now there is an illustration, a teaching, a concept to us that's hard to misunderstand. If you don't understand that Jesus is the head of the body, what he says goes in the church, if you don't understand that, you probably need help getting home today. Because it's just pretty simple. Jesus, you have a body and you have a head. So your body doesn't do anything, nothing, that your head doesn't tell it to do. So it all comes from the head, which is certainly Christ. All authority has been given to me on heaven and on earth. Now, again, we believe that. We believe those words in red. We believe the teaching of the apostles, and we try to follow them. We don't change them up because they're not popular anymore. No. All the direction comes from the head. It comes from the head, goes from the head down. And Jesus is the head of the body. We have a body here. And he is certainly the head of the body, which is the church, the ekklesia, the church. So Jesus here rules over his church. Again, out there in the religious world, a lot of folks just don't get that, you know. Had a good friend of mine in Tunica came to me, and he is complaining. His church has been sent a woman preacher, and he wasn't happy about it. The hierarchy, of course, they call the shots. All these religions around us, they have hierarchies. The head is not Christ. The head are these supposedly inspired, good men that make these decisions. And I said, well, this is what Jesus said and the apostles said about women. They are to remain silent in the church. Does she preach like maybe using sign language so that she's silent, or what? How does she do that? I said, well, it's what the Bible says. He said, yeah, I know, but that's just the way it is. Sadly, too many people have bought into the fact that it's okay for their church to be run by a group of men and not by Jesus Christ. That's our plea. We believe in the head being Christ and his teachings being that which we are following. So it's a huge difference in our brotherhood, because the head of this organization, the head of this kingdom, the head of this body is Jesus Christ. And he calls the shots. And not only that, he put them all, they're right here for us to read and to understand and to see. Thank goodness. And some of those bodies don't want you to read or to understand this. We're running a little section in this next issue of the Magnolia Messenger celebrating Tyndale's. It's the 500th year anniversary this month of the Tyndale Bible being printed. It's the first Bible, 100 years before the King James, first Bible translated into English. And he was executed for that. Over history, organizations have tried to keep the head of the body, which is Christ, tried to keep him out of the church's business, so to speak. But that's extremely sad. We certainly believe in him being the head of the body, and we serve him and him alone. There's that famous passage, in Revelation 21 that he sees that New Jerusalem. And Jerusalem, by the way, is symbolism of the church. It goes back to Isaiah 2, the word of the Lord will go forth out of Zion, out of Jerusalem. So Jerusalem is kind of symbolic in the New Testament of the church that began on the day of Pentecost in the city of Jerusalem about 9 a.m. in the morning on a Sunday morning. So a lot of folks kind of understand that, but the passage in Revelation 21, John sees the New Jerusalem coming down as a bride adorned for her husband. I think that is a symbolic of Christ coming and marrying the two kingdoms of heaven and the kingdoms of earth. Then we're all going to be joined together in that wonderful place called heaven. So as I have mentioned before, and I'm about to finish up here, the people that want to say that they don't need to be affiliated with any church, boy, they got it wrong. I'm sorry, Jesus died for the church. He purchased it with his own blood. This brotherhood is blood bought. He purchased it. He died so that it could be established. So there's nothing more important in our lives than the Lord's church, because it's Christ's church. It is the church of Christ, and you can't get to heaven. The only way to get to heaven is through the church. That's it. So if you want to get to heaven, you better be a part of the kingdom of heaven here on earth. Because there's no other way of getting there. It's the only taxi, that's going to get you there. It's the only Uber that, is going to get you up to heaven. That's it. It's through the church. That's the redeemed. That's the saved. And the Lord added to the believers those that were being saved. So the saved are the church. The church is the saved. Which, by the way, in the 30s and 40s and 50s, we all have heard this. We all heard this. When the religious bodies were debating us, and by the way, their hierarchies began to forbid their men to debate us in the 60s and 70s. Because they were losing so many members. They were losing these debates big time. But they developed one strategy that has been somewhat successful. Out of these debates, the teaching, the concept that if you want to go to heaven, it's the church. The church is the vehicle to heaven. And so they came up with this concept. Oh, yes. Those people down at the Church of Christ, they believe that they're the only ones going to heaven. How many times have we all heard that one give to us? Well, they're right and they're wrong. Okay? Yeah, we do believe that we, who are a part of the church that Jesus established and died for, we believe that's the only avenue to heaven. Buddha can't get you there. Muhammad can't get you there. So, yeah, we believe that you need to be a member of the church of Christ if you want to go to heaven. So, just make sure if you hear that, you kind of clarify that a little bit, that, hey, it's the redeemed, the church, the body, the kingdom, the believers that are being saved, and non-believers will not be. All right, the church, a little bit of heaven on earth. Any questions? You got 1.5 minutes. Thank you all for being here. Glad to have our visitors with us, and we will see you next week. And I think, let me see where we're going to go here. Let's do, we've done Gehenna. Let's do, how do I get to heaven, and who will you see up there? How do you get there, and who are you going to see up there? Really interesting